Imagine owing so much in parking tickets that the government just swoops in and seizes your car.
Right, which is already a pretty extreme scenario.
Exactly. But now, imagine that car isn't a car at all. Imagine that car is a multi-million-dollar apartment building.
It sounds like, a theoretical thought experiment. But that scenario is rapidly becoming a very real legal battle playing out in the real estate world today.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you are joining us for this one. Because whether you own a home or, rent an apartment, or honestly just care about how far government power can reach into private ownership.
Yeah, this impacts everyone.
Right. Today's mission directly impacts you. We are unpacking New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's explosive new housing policy. He basically wants to legally seize neglected apartment buildings from private landlords and just hand the deeds over to nonprofits and tenant groups.
Which, that represents a massive, totally unprecedented shift in how local governments treat private property.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at a policy that completely redefines the line between a landlord's private investment and the government's authority.
And we pulled a massive stack of sources for today's dive to figure out how this actually works. And just a quick note for you listening, our source stack today is wild.
It really is all over the map.
Yeah. We have articles from conservative outlets, like Fox Business and the Daily Signal, sitting right next to progressive local Brooklyn magazines. We also pulled real estate industry journals and even some commentary from a right-wing YouTube channel.
Which means we are dealing with some very strong opinions.
Exactly. Because of this mix, our sources today contain highly politically charged content from both the right wing and the left wing. To be absolutely clear, we are not taking sides or endorsing any of these viewpoints. Our job is simply to impartially report what is in these sources and help you understand the ideas being debated.
Right. We need to strip away all the shouting. We want to look at the actual math, the legal mechanisms, and, the profound constitutional arguments driving this whole firestorm.
So before we even touch the political outrage, let's look at the mechanics. The mayor calls it the Safer Homes Act.
Though policy wonks usually refer to it as a public stewardship proposal.
Right, public stewardship. And Mamdani is currently traveling across all 5 boroughs, holding these, he calls them rental ripoff hearings.
Yeah, that's the branding.
He literally sits and listens to tenants detail. Just absolute nightmares. Living with black mold, broken elevators for months at a time, zero heat in middle winter.
And the administration is using these hearings to basically build a case against what they label the absolute worst landlords in the city.
But instead of just mailing them another fine that goes unpaid.
Right, which happens all the time.
Yeah, they just ignore it. But this act creates a mathematical formula to strip them of their property entirely. Okay, let's unpack this. How does the city mathematically justify taking a whole building?
Well, according to the sources, the first trigger happens if a landlord owes unpaid taxes or fines equal to 25% of the property's value.
Wait, 25%?
Yeah. So to put that in 8th grade math terms, if you own a typical Brooklyn apartment building worth $10 million,
Okay.
you would need to rack up $2.5 million in unpaid city fines before the government swoops in.
Wow, $2.5 million.
Right. And that math highlights a really crucial detail. A landlord does not trigger this by missing one property tax payment.
Or like failing to fix a single leaky pipe.
Exactly. Racking up millions in debt requires years of severe chronic neglect. And there is also a second, slightly lower threshold.
Okay, what's that one?
The city can seize the building if the fines only equal 15% of the property's value, but there is a catch. The building must also average 5 hazardous violations per unit.
Per unit? That's a lot.
And it requires at least $1,000 in emergency repairs subsidized by the city.
So that means the city has already had to step in and fix things because the situation became a literal hazard.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's the part that makes this totally unique, I think. Once the city takes the building, they don't keep it.
Right, they don't want to run it.
They wipe their hands of it and transfer the deed to entities they call responsible stewards. And these stewards are like community land trusts, nonprofits, or even the tenant unions themselves.
Yep.
So it's essentially a reverse foreclosure. But instead of a bank taking your house to sell it to the highest bidder to recoup their cash, the city takes the building and effectively gifts it to a nonprofit.
And legally, the tool they rely on for this is fascinating. It's called an in rem foreclosure.
In rem.
Yeah, in rem is a Latin legal term. It literally means against the thing. So in a normal lawsuit, you sue a person or a company.
Right.
But in an in rem foreclosure, the city literally files a lawsuit against the dirt and the bricks. They are suing the property itself for the debts attached to it.
Suing the building itself. I mean, that sounds like a legal loophole designed to bypass the owner entirely.
It kind of is. It bypasses the owner's personal bankruptcy protections, allowing the city to just sever the owner's tie to the property. And this is actually a reboot of an old discontinued program called the Third Party Transfer Program, or TPT.
Wait, if they already had this program, why did they discontinue it?
Because the mechanics of taking someone's property are incredibly messy.
I can imagine.
Under the old TPT program and under this new in rem proposal, the city cannot just grab the keys overnight. They legally must wait 4 full months after a final court judgment.
To give the owner a chance to pay.
Exactly. A one absolute last chance to clear their debts. And historically, it proved to be a bureaucratic nightmare.
I mean, giving buildings away to tenants sounds like a utopian dream in theory. But when you look at the political identity of the people writing this policy,
Oh, yeah.
you instantly see why this proposal ignited a massive ideological war across the country.
The backlash here is entirely driven by the underlying political ideology. Critics look at the administration's stated goals and see a very different motive than just fixing broken elevators.
Right, because Mayor Mamdani openly identifies as a democratic socialist. And recently, he appointed a woman named C. Weaver to lead the mayor's office to protect tenants.
And she is a very polarizing figure.
Very. The sources highlight that Weaver is facing an absolute tidal wave of backlash for her past social media posts. She literally called homeownership a weapon of white supremacy.
Yeah, that quote got a lot of attention.
And she explicitly argued that society needs to transition real estate into a collective good.
So, when a high-ranking city official publicly states that private home ownership is inherently oppressive, critics immediately sound the alarm.
Naturally.
They argue this proves the administration does not actually care about holding bad landlords accountable. They argue the true goal is to systematically dismantle private property rights entirely.
The opponents are certainly not holding back their punches.
Right.
Like City Councilwoman Vicky Palladino, she claims this entire policy is a coordinated plot.
A plot to do what?
She says the mayor just wants to seize valuable real estate and hand it over to his political allies. She said it effectively makes the Democratic Socialists of America the new land barons of New York City.
Wow. New land barons. And, this local zoning fight escalated all the way to the White House.
Oh, way.
President Donald Trump weighed in, repeatedly calling Mayor Mamdani a communist.
He actually threatened to completely withhold federal funding from New York City over this policy. And I mean, think about the scale of that threat for a second. Federal funds make up about 6.4% of New York City's total budget.
Which is a massive number.
We are talking about $7.4 billion. Losing that money means gutting schools, slashing sanitation, and crippling emergency services.
Yeah, it would be devastating.
And Representative Nicole Maliotakis also went on Fox Business, pointed directly at this property seizure plan, and explicitly labeled it communism.
What's fascinating here is how this policy exposes the deepest fundamental tension in modern society.
How so?
Well, we are basically watching a crash collision between two foundational ideas. On one side, the administration views housing strictly as a basic human right.
Right.
Their underlying logic dictates that if a private owner fails to provide safe shelter, they simply forfeit the privilege of owning that capital.
And the other side.
On the other side, conservatives, developers, and constitutional scholars view housing as a private commodity explicitly protected by the Constitution.
Right. Property rights.
Exactly. They warn that once the government grants itself the power to seize private property simply because officials dislike how it is managed, you basically pave a direct road to pure collectivism.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Is this actually a covert attempt to abolish private property? Or, is the city just using the only leverage they have left against slumlords who refuse to follow basic health and safety laws?
That's the question.
Because if you owe $2 million in fines, you are breaking the law.
That is the core debate. But critics point out a glaring issue with the city playing the moral authority here. They are pointing a giant laser at the city's own track record as a property manager.
The hypocrisy argument.
Yes.
And frankly, based on the sources, This is the most devastating attack the critics have. They argue the city government is acting like an unbelievable hypocrite because the city itself is widely considered the absolute biggest slumlord in New York.
It really is.
Let's look at NYCHA, right? The New York City Housing Authority. They house over 500,000 residents.
To put that in perspective, if NYCHA were its own city, it would be larger than Miami or Atlanta.
That is insane.
And the living conditions inside those buildings are notoriously abysmal. NYCHA currently faces a capital repair backlog of $78 billion.
Wait, hold on. Stop right there. $78 billion in repairs.
$78 billion.
That is more than the entire gross domestic product of several small countries. How does a single city agency even function with a deficit like that?
Barely. I mean, they currently have over 600,000 unanswered work orders just sitting in their system.
600,000.
Yes. And the residents living in these city-owned buildings complain about the exact same hazards the mayor uses to justify seizing private buildings.
Like what?
Widespread toxic mold, broken heating systems in the winter, massive vermin infestations, and busted elevators trapping elderly residents on high floors.
The irony is completely blinding, but it gets even worse. According to the sources, in 2024, the Department of Justice stepped in and charged 70 NYCHA employees with bribery and extortion.
Yeah, that was a huge scandal.
Contractors literally had to pay bribes just to get a job fixing a broken pipe in a public housing unit. It stands as the largest single-day federal bribery takedown in U.S. history.
So critics ask a very simple, very logical question. How can the city aggressively seize a private building for having mold and broken elevators when the city's own public buildings suffer from the exact same neglect?
Plus the historic federal corruption.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. I mean, think about the mechanics of handing a distressed building to a tenant group. It's essentially like repossessing a total car and handing the keys to a teenager who doesn't have a job to pay the mechanic.
Right, taking the asset is easy.
Funding the recovery is the nightmare.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this highlights the immense, crushing financial burden of maintaining aging, affordable housing.
It's not cheap.
Running these massive, century-old buildings costs an absolute fortune in plumbing, roofing, and structural repairs.
So if the city government, backed by billions in tax revenue, cannot afford to fix its own buildings, how do they expect a local nonprofit or like a volunteer tenant union to suddenly produce $3 million for a new boiler system?
They don't have a magic money wand.
No.
That is the structural reality that critics emphasize. Seizing the deed is only step one. Actually financing the renovations and managing the property long-term requires immense capital and deep expertise.
Which they probably don't have.
Real estate experts strongly doubt these newly appointed stewards possess either the funds or the knowledge to genuinely improve the living conditions for the renters.
So we have severe political outrage and a massive hypocrisy debate. But there is a huge practical question that supersedes all of this. Can the mayor actually pull this off legally?
That's the multi-million-dollar question.
Like, will this plan survive even 10 minutes in a federal courtroom?
Well, the early legal indicators suggest an incredibly difficult uphill battle. The administration just suffered a major, highly publicized legal defeat involving a massive private bankruptcy case with the Pinnacle Group.
The Pinnacle Group, okay, they owned thousands of rent-stabilized properties across the city, right? And they owed the government a massive amount of money.
They owed the city over $12 million in unpaid fines. And when the Pinnacle Group filed for bankruptcy, Mamdani's administration tried to aggressively intervene.
To do what?
They tried to block the sale of those properties to a new private buyer. The city argued they deserved a say in who bought the buildings because of the massive debt owed to the public.
Well, let me guess, the judge didn't buy it.
Federal bankruptcy judge David Jones firmly blocked the city's effort.
Why did the federal judge side with the landlord over the city?
Because federal bankruptcy courts exist to pay off creditors in a strict, legally defined order. Local city fines are generally considered unsecured debt.
Oh, I see.
The federal judge essentially told the city to get in line behind the major banks. This proves a critical point. Federal bankruptcy law completely supersedes local city council agendas.
Right.
Federal judges will not simply roll over and let a mayor disrupt complex private real estate deals just because the city is angry about zoning violations.
That is a massive setback for the mayor's strategy. It means landlords can potentially use federal bankruptcy protection as a shield against the city.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Which forces the city to rely on much harder, deeply controversial legal paths, like eminent domain.
Okay, when I hear eminent domain, I usually think about the government forcing a farmer to sell their land so the state can build a new highway.
Right, the classic example.
The government forces a sale for public use.
That is the classic definition. Under the law, the city must definitively prove the property seizure serves a valid public use or actively alleviates urban blight.
But I'm guessing that's hard to do here.
Legal scholars warn this is a nearly impossible hurdle for Mamdani's specific targets.
Why is it harder to use eminent domain on an apartment building?
Because these buildings are already occupied by tenants and the units are already rent stabilized. The city cannot walk into a federal court and claim they need to seize the building to create new affordable housing for the public.
Because it already is affordable housing.
Exactly. It already functions as affordable housing.
Ah, that makes perfect sense. They aren't building a highway or a new hospital. They're just swapping out the name on the deed.
Yes.
So the city has to prove the building is so dangerously neglected that its mere existence constitutes urban blight.
Yes, and they have to prove that subjective standard on a strict, agonizingly slow, case-by-case basis.
That sounds tedious.
Very. Plus, they face massive procedural bottlenecks within their own government. We mentioned the in-rem foreclosures earlier. Even if a judge agrees to the seizure, the city waits 4 months.
Right, the waiting period.
Then the administration must secure official approval from the city council to actually transfer the deed to a nonprofit.
And navigating the city council is not a sure thing, is it? City Council Speaker Julie Menin has a long documented history of blocking similar bills to protect local developers.
She does.
Although, the sources noted one highly surprising detail. The Real Estate Board of New York, known as REBNY, actually voiced some limited support for the fundamental goal of this policy.
Really?
Yeah, but strictly in cases of extreme life-threatening neglect.
That concession shocked a lot of political analysts, but it demonstrates that even the cutthroat real estate industry wants the absolute worst, most dangerous slumlord actors permanently removed from the market.
Nobody likes a bad landlord.
Yeah, right. They just demand incredibly strict legal guardrails to prevent sweeping government overreach into standard property disputes.
So what does this all mean? If the administration cannot even get past a federal bankruptcy judge, is this entire Safer Homes Act just elaborate political theater?
It could be.
Like, is the mayor just loudly threatening to seize buildings to scare lazy landlords into finally fixing their elevators?
This raises an important question about how far local governments are willing to push the boundaries of constitutional property rights.
Yeah.
The mayor clearly wants to aggressively test the extreme limits of his legal authority, but landlord advocacy groups argue this is a blatant, unconstitutional attack on the very concept of private capital.
And they are ready to fight it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
They firmly believe the federal courts will ultimately step in, cite constitutional protections, and just shut the entire program down.
It truly is a high-stakes constitutional battle. And it connects directly back to you, the listener. You might live 1,000 miles away from New York, but whether you rent a small apartment or own a suburban home, the final outcome of this fight matters.
It definitely sets a tone.
It will establish a massive legal precedent. If New York successfully proves it can mathematically justify seizing private buildings, you will see city councils across the entire country instantly adopt these exact same tactics.
Without a doubt.
It fundamentally redefines property rights, tenant leverage, and government regulation nationwide.
It drastically alters the risk calculus for anyone putting their capital into real estate investment anywhere in the country.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We spent today talking about landlords and apartment buildings. But if a city government successfully sets a supreme legal precedent that it can seize private property simply because poor management threatens the public good.
Where does it end?
Exactly. Where does that line logically stop?
Could a city council eventually decide to seize a private hospital, a commercial grocery store, or even a local energy grid if they decide the private owners are not managing them to the sitter's exact standards?
It's a huge question.
It becomes a remarkably steep, slippery slope once the government legally normalizes redistributing private assets based on performance reviews.
Keep that precedent in mind the next time you pay your rent or your local property taxes. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We will see you next time.